I knew exactly where I was going to shoot him, like without hesitation, without doubt. I had that spot picked. I knew range. I knew exactly where I wanted him.
All right. Well, welcome back to the Hunter Podcast. Kind of a monumental day for us in that we have our first actual guest of the Hunter Podcast. Mr. Corey Horn is in the studio, ladies and gentlemen. And, I think this is probably, it might be the only time that somebody in the podcast has longer hair than Jared.
He's also the first guest, so it's not that big of an accomplishment. But it's probably the longest hair of anybody that will ever be.
I know, man.
I would assume.
I'll take that title.
It's a very cool title. So, really happy to have you in here, Corey. I mean, I know you and Jared go way back, and I'm excited for everybody to kind of hear that. But, more special to the Hunter brand is that quite possibly the first episode of Hunter period is going to be the hunt that you and Jared did together this year in Ohio. And I've been fortunate enough to be able to watch some of the behind the scenes on that. And I think it really resonates what Hunter is as a brand, in that this camaraderie aspect, this relationship aspect, and then the connection to going out and hunting deer together is so important. So first of all, man, appreciate you coming up from Nashville and being with us on this. But I kind of want to set the tone for everybody listening to this. And I know Jared actually did it as part of a spine in the actual episode, but give us a little background on kind of how you and Jared met to hunt, because I would say, and no offense to you, obviously, but hunting is not a traditional background for you by any means, which is really cool to me. And this what we're doing with Hunter as a brand. But I guess give us a little background of how you and Jared know each other, and then let's kind of take it from there and as the story kind of develops. Yeah.
So I grew up in South Florida, so I was like all beach, loved fishing. And always had an idea, like I would love to have hunted, but we didn't have any firearms, we didn't have any bows, like there was nowhere to really go and do that.
Right.
When I went to college, I was always interested in it, and I got a college internship in Pittsburgh. And so as part of the internship, it was like, hey, we got you a host family, and you're going to go live with these people.
That's crazy,
and
man.
So out of the blue, I get this call, and a couple weeks later, I moved in, and Jared was 15 at the time.
Is this pre-Jared pumping or post-Jared pumping?
It was pre.
It was pre.
So right in the beginning.
This is like pre-Captain America, like experiments of like...
Well, I had gotten in a motocross accident about probably a year before that. So I was like coming out of recovery from that. I mean, it was a
maybe Dwayne and Vicky thought, hey, like we're not really sure what's going to happen to Jared. Let's bring in a better looking, older replacement, to come in.
But so I was recovering from that. So yeah, I had started lifting some weights and stuff. But
I feel partly responsible for that.
Hugely, because I think that summer was when we just we had nothing but time, and it was just basically poolside, and it was a good summer, and so we lifting weights was a big part of that.
Well, I mean,
and his older brother is a bodybuilder, a professional bodybuilder,
which is
so he
cool,
brought
man.
some experience, and I again was 14, 15 years old, so I was looking to anything. I was like, oh, protein, like weights, cool.
Well, dude, let's tie that in though. So here is Corey stepping into your household, right? Older male figure. Like, what are you feeling at this point? Because it's just like
I wasn't feeling it because I didn't think that I needed it. I had friends, and I was like, I have my summer in my mind was planned out, or at least I was like, I'm gonna basically do nothing.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't looking forward to it, because the perception that I had was we would go to church with my parents, and after one of those Sundays, my mom was like, well, this is a possibility, and we mentioned that we would be available for that, and all I knew was that it was a pastor coming to be the worship interim worship pastor, I guess was the position. And so I was like, I mean, cool, just make sure he stays out of my room, and whatever.
I got my own plans.
Whatever. And so, but before I knew it, she showed up, and I don't know if I was there at the moment that she showed up or not, but
you weren't yet. My first interaction was Jared walked in with a couple of his punk friends, walk in the door, and they're just like, hey, and they would walk off. I was like,
it wasn't
I was
hyped that this guy was coming to stay with us. It was just cool,
long summer ahead.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah, what kind of music? I don't care.
I was like, this is gonna be great.
That's funny, man. And and obviously we've all kind of been there. I know you grew up with female siblings. I grew up with female siblings. So my cousin was kind of my co-conspirator in a lot of things growing up, and I had my friends group, but like, I think at that age, especially if you're involved in the outdoors, you love to share those experiences with someone, and there is a soul kind of purpose there that, you like to be by yourself and you can reflect on things and think about things. But part of it is really being able to enjoy that with people who kind of share that passion. And of course, Corey, you coming up, from South Florida, it's like you like fishing and outdoors, but hunting's still a distant kind of thing for you. I assume, Jared, at that time, you're living in that space, right? The belief of whitetails building.
Yeah, I was building for sure. My parents hadn't bought the farm from my grandparents yet, so we had access to that, but a lot of it was leased. And so we didn't have access to most of it for hunting, but there was a few pieces that we could kind of get out on, and definitely I was starting to get interested in that. And so as a part of that accident that I had mentioned in the surgery and stuff, that ended a lot of things for me in terms of wrestling and football, and pushed me in a direction of more, maybe less contact, but just looking elsewhere for
what are you going to grab
purpose,
onto?
You were trapping a lot. It was when you were really
and I had always trapped, because my dad had traps, hanging in our basement and stuff, and so I got into that. I had always done that growing up, and I had bow hunted for sure, but just kind of whatever I could do around the house. I would hunt out of the neighbors' tree stands I would find in the woods and stuff. I can actually remember do you remember those old I don't know what the brand of stands were, but they had chains.
Oh yeah,
they had chains and the cloth seats that fold out.
I think they were old APIs or something right?
Like that.
Like literally a chain that went around the tree.
So I can remember, it was probably a while before Corey showed up, but this was just my intro into what is a tree stand? Like, what is bow hunting? I remember thinking that I climbed one of my neighbors, his name was Bill Carazia. He ended up being a really cool mentor for me from a hunting perspective. But I found one of his tree stands in the woods, and I can remember climbing it. I had like Austin or John Rogan with me, like one of my little elementary school buddies, middle school maybe. I found this tree stand and I climbed up in it. I was like, this thing's crazy. And I remember thinking that seat was like the roof. So I was like sitting on the
fetal position
platform, and I was like, how does this? I don't understand. How would you how's this supposed to work?
This doesn't make any sense.
But I'm not even sure where I was going with that. But ultimately, yeah, my interest in hunting and other things like bodybuilding was another thing. Just lifting weights. I was like shifting my focus from these things that were no longer an option to what now is a big part of my life.
And so were you in college at that time, Corey, or just out of high school?
I was in college.
You in college?
It was my last. I had to do an internship before I could graduate, and so it was right in that tail end of college for me. And so You
were like 21.
I was
22?
21. I was 21.
Because he was just old enough that I could drive with a permit.
I was thinking you were going to say to buy you beer. That's where I was going with it.
Yeah, that too, I guess. But because I had just gotten my permit, so I would have been like 15, like going on 16, I guess, and so I just got my driver's permit, and he was old enough that I could drive with. So it was sweet because we could get out.
So now you're finding some uses for Corey being around.
I was like, okay,
right?
he's useful. All right.
And Jared did have, he'd just gotten off his elk hunt. It was a year and a half before that, 2 years before that, 14.
So you still had probably that year, because that was my dad's, like after the accident thing. He's like, I want to just do something together. So we did that elk hunt. That would have been probably the year prior.
Yeah. So I mean, when I walked into this house, like this was something totally different for me because you have all these hives, you have the stuff that's trapping, and I'm like, this world is so far away from me, but this is amazing. I'm really excited about this.
Well, and dude, you're an extrovert by personality, so a lot of people probably would have walked into that and felt really intimidated into this kind of man cave lifestyle that you're walking into. But knowing your background now and how you are as a person, like I can see you being like, oh yeah, like how do I get I want to do that.
It wasn't that bad, right? Like my mom kept a pretty clean house. It's
amazing.
It's not like my dad has been a diehard bow hunter for his whole life. Like she allowed him to get his first mount, which was like a pheasant that she bought for him when I was like 12.
Yeah, the house, it was like a beautiful lodge. Like it was immaculate.
Yeah. So we were just starting to really go down that road.
Yeah.
The chandelier was the first thing that
it's not like
they have this massive antler.
It's not like you walked into like a trapper's
shed.
No, it's not that. Not like that by any means. So
it was spectacular.
So you come in that summer. Are you there all summer then?
I am. Yeah, I'm there for 3 months.
Okay.
And so I either had to do, for the actual internship side of it, I either had to do like the full 3 months or X amount of hours for the internship.
Yep.
So I could have easily just taking a little bit of time here and there to.
Hey, we got somebody coming in. Come on in.
Hey.
Hey, I didn't want to. I'm trying to be.
No, you're fine, man.
You're good, man.
Just drop it.
All right, hey, I'm too out there for court.
Thank you.
Oh, right on. We
That's
know what
me.
those are.
Appreciate you, man.
See you, dude.
Have a good day.
Hey, man.
See you, man.
Brian, our UPS guy.
He's the man.
He's the bomb.
He is. And
He
he's
takes
bringing me
care of
packages.
Oh, yeah.
I come and visit, and I
Dude,
get
he's here.
packages here
That's
on the
the
podcast, real time.
That's-
He's here every day.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That'd be the rest. Usually it's hunting stuff, but today it's the rest of the podcast.
At some point, he'll probably be a guest on the podcast. Brian from UPS. Like, how much hunting tree stands do you deliver in a given year?
Brian's rocking a mean beard right now.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
so that's an
intense.
interesting point. Not to deviate from that, but up until just a couple months ago, you were not allowed to have facial hair as a UPS employee.
Really?
It was a corporate policy. And then they kind of let that a little looser, and he's like, man, full Grizzly Adams, like, you know.
He
And
looks great.
and the dude's on the mountain. I mean, and it's cold and it's windy, and I mean, you know,
Yeah.
he's parking at the end of driveways that are a mile long and hiking those things straight up there, you know. And so yeah, he's like, first the opportunity they gave me to grow a beard, I was like, yeah, you went balls deep.
He's usually these Rogue Ridge bikes, and he's just dropping off all kind of stuff all the time
Yeah.
for us.
He probably thinks we live the coolest life.
That's not bad.
That's pretty good.
It's pretty
Our
cool.
life is pretty great. I mean, all around.
So I guess, Corey, like if you're thinking about that, and I guess where I'm looking at this now being, what, Jared, 13, 14 years later, in 3 months, you guys made a connection that's now
yeah, so
lasted.
to kind of tag on to that. So I get there, and the first thing I find out is that we have an overnight trip for the internship to go and do this thing. So I ended up unintentionally knocking out all the hours for my internship in the first like 2.5 weeks
Jeez.
of this thing, because I was constantly on call. I was doing
Yep.
all this stuff. The only reason I got the internship was because I already knew how to do the position. It wasn't like really didn't learn anything. There was no one in that position.
You
They
just said it
literally
was part of the requirement.
hired me to do this job interim.
Yeah.
And so I was done technically with my responsibilities. I still had stuff to do. And Jared was a part of that because he was playing drums too at the time. So we connected over music. And then he started educating me on this whole world of, I was like, what is all this stuff? This is amazing. And
I was like, I don't know. Seems cool though, right?
so
My
they,
dad's gun cabinet. Like, let's figure it out.
Yeah, still stay out of my room, but yeah, it's cool.
Well, I think the end of that story was I ultimately ended up sleeping in the basement, which was Corey's room. So I was like, I moved out of my room and into the basement.
We just had the whole
like
basement.
we had like our whole setup down there.
Bachelor pad.
so they got me, they gave me a PSE. And that's where they started taking me out and just in the backyard and shooting and kind of getting me comfortable
It's
with
a lot in 3 months, man, to just like, you know, really pick up and move to a whole different culture, you know, different part of the country, you know, into a family you didn't know, into a lot of the lifestyle that you weren't familiar with, you know.
Well, Corey was up for it though, because you'd done a lot of traveling with like the band, right? So through.
Yeah,
Right, at that point?
I had already traveled international a ton, and my parents actually thought I was going to be, like when I was younger, they thought I was going to be a forest ranger because I just loved being in the woods all the time.
Sure.
So now to tie something that I already loved directly with the chance to be out there and do something that I'm like, oh, this is really cool.
That's awesome.
I picked it up immediately and I loved it. I was like, this is way better than anything I can imagine going out into the woods for, to be able to go and sit and relax. So like the therapeutic side of it on top of the actual sporting side of it, and how to tie those together, especially that it's a game against yourself, right? Like
Yep.
when you're pulling that bow back, just like golfing or something like that. I mean, it's you against yourself in those odds of
For sure.
delivery. And I loved that self-challenge, and they were really patient to teach me and educate me on that side of it.
Well, so how did that happen? Because it was summer. It was the summer. Were you with us for into hunting season the first year that you came out?
Mm-mm.
I don't think you
No,
were.
left, and then the next year I
came
came
back.
back.
But
to
see, that's
hunt
what I
for
was going to ask. You
Thanksgiving?
know, you
Uh-huh.
guys.
But-
We started
but
a
we had-
Thanksgiving oh, it was later that year for
But
Thanksgiving.
did I give you the bow that summer,
Mm-hmm.
and you had started shooting it? Because I got my Matthews adrenaline.
And the Thanksgiving, that first Thanksgiving after I came back and hunted my first time
Wow.
up at the farm. Is
So I
when
mean,
we
it
went out.
was that's rapid fire coming in. That's cool though to see how like, you know, literally it could be that much of a time frame that hooks you into it, and then it's like, because I mean, listen, life gets busy, especially when you're in college and not knowing what's going on, and you're in high school. Like, you know, things are moving around a lot. So for you to make that connection back and be like, I guess what was that like? Was it like, hey, dude, we're gonna hunt and around Thanksgiving, you should come?
Why did you come back that Thanksgiving? What, did I invite you to come hunt, or
You
were you
did.
there for Thanksgiving anyways?
It was kind of twofold. There was a lady that I was seeing at that time that lived in Pennsylvania, and so I was living in Virginia.
Oh, okay.
Was?
And so I went to Pennsylvania, and then I believe that we went. I came over to the farm after.
Okay, so you must have called me and said, "Hey, I'm going to be in that area."
I was like, "I'm coming,"
and I probably said, "Sweet, I'll be hunting. Like, do you want to jump?"
That's probably exactly how it happened.
It was something like that, because I wasn't going back to Florida at that point. It was too far to drive.
Sure.
Well, and I couldn't
like
even. There was no thought to like, well, let's hunt together. Like,
it was just like, hey, this is what I'm doing. If you want to come.
I was 12 years old. My very first hunt, my dad was like, "Cool, your stand's that way."
Yeah.
I was like, "Okay." Cool. So Corey was like, "Hey, you're hunting on the Thompson," and
So you were just tossed right into it.
Yeah.
So I get there.
And this is Ohio, right? So we're now on the farm.
Yep, we're on the farm.
Yep, we're on the farm.
I had been to the farm before. Like,
Okay.
I knew kind of the layout, at least the general layout. And so I go to hunt, and they're like, "All right, you're going to go here. You're going to go to this plot. You're going to cut up this way." And
I still don't think Mom and Dad had bought the farm yet, because I was hunting like behind the office, like the little chunks here and there that hadn't been leased out because they weren't big enough to be.
Sure.
So I walk out first time in the woods by myself in the morning with my bow, going to hunt, and I know that I'm supposed to go to this tree stand and follow this cornfield up the thing. I can't see anything.
You're such a gracious host at this point.
I was like 16.
Like, dude, yeah, your stand's
I was like,
over
"You're
there.
an adult. Figure it out."
Yeah, you're just not hunting here. You're over there.
Yeah.
So the kicker is that they didn't know, but that cornfield got cut. So what I was supposed to be following, I didn't know where the lines were on the whole field, because there was kind of a knoll, and so I'm walking in, I'm like, "There's no corn here. This is all cut." And it's cut on both sides of me, so I don't even know what field line I'm supposed to be walking. And it's dark, and I can hear deer blowing at me. I didn't know what that was when I first got out there. I was like, there some other animals out here? Like, I had no idea. Super green. I finally make it to a stand, and it's a ladder stand up to just a wood platform. And the ladder wasn't secured, so the wood platform was going like this. So I climb in it. It's wet.
It was?
And
Man,
I'm literally sitting in my...
Wait a minute. We've
skills
never
are-
had
100%.
a wooden tree stand.
So come to find out, I sat in that I saw one deer out of it that whole morning.
Wait a minute.
I'm surprised you survived.
You went in the wrong...
that.
That's why. That's why.
I came back and I was like, this stand was really interesting. Like, I didn't realize it'd be this way. And they're like, "Oh yeah, that wasn't our stand."
Yeah, dude, you're like 7
What?
properties away.
I don't know how you found... There was like
on
an
the other
old,
side.
decrepit, like... Not really a tree stand. He's like some 2x4s. Some kids
It's
probably
like-
put in the... Oh, it was the platform that's way down at the bottom. It's literally like... I think they tried to build a tree house there at some point, and they just like stopped building it. That's what you got into.
So I couldn't even stand up in it because it was too flimsy to stand up. I thought I was going to fall out of it. We didn't have harnesses.
It's huge. It's huge. It's like 8 foot by 8 foot.
Oh, it wasn't that big. Not this one.
Maybe we're talking about different things.
Yeah, I mean, it was not that stand I was supposed to end up in, is what
Bottom
I ended
line,
up found. Yeah, it was on the other side of the
In
field.
fact, it was downright dangerous.
It was
at
very
this point.
dangerous. Looking at what we do now, I mean,
Not
it
even
was...
any steps. He just like shimmied up the...
It was probably just like an aluminum ladder against it. He's like, I guess this is it.
For sure was not safe. There was definitely no safety harnesses. I don't think I hunted with a safety harness till I was 20 something.
It's been in the last like 3 years we added safety harnesses,
Yeah.
Yeah,
which is important.
they are important.
It is, yeah. So that was the first experience that I had, and it was amazing.
Well,
All of that to say, I was like, I want more.
frankly,
of
I'm
this.
impressed that you stuck with it after that, because a lot of people would have been cussing up a storm and been like, yeah, this sucks. Like, this is ridiculous. So okay, you have that experience. You come back. Jared's like, I don't know. Like, that's where you were supposed to go, right? Did you? I assume
They knew immediately as soon
like,
as I started
you're not in
telling
the
them.
right
They're
place,
like, where'd you go?
Well, I think I said probably what I just said right now is wooden platform. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And then everyone was, it was hooting and hollering because it was. I mean, I was hunting out of someone else's stand.
And
Apparently,
so
no one came.
is that that's the first hunting experience?
First one
That's
out of the
crazy,
gate that
dude.
I had, and I was like, yeah, I'm in for it. Let's do it again. Let's go.
Very cool.
So then I think you came out with me the next time to show me where it was,
Okay.
and got me to the stand.
I vaguely remember that. Yeah, I think I remember.
But I'm not sure how we eventually started in the same tree from that and filming.
It would have been when we started filming stuff, which we've done kind of off and on over the years, trying to figure out, like, you know.
So has it been a consistent thing year in and year out since that first experience of like, hey, you know, every year we come up, or was it kind of loose at first and then it's gotten more regimental?
It was pretty consistent for a few years, and then I moved around. I moved out of the country, and then I was traveling a lot, and then I just couldn't figure out, like, so with my band, I was on the road 300 days a year,
Right.
and so there was no way to like even schedule when we could be there or not. So I knew he was hunting. The invitation was always to come, and the desire was to always get there, but it just didn't work out schedule wise. So But then we kind of got a little bit of momentum where we blocked Thanksgiving for road. So I'd come up for Thanksgiving. And then the day after Thanksgiving, we would typically hunt.
And eventually, I don't remember exactly. Hopefully, you can tell me how long ago you met Corey, Carrie, your now wife, and who happens to be 10 minutes down the road from here.
That's crazy.
Which was like, oh, well, dude, now you can just come hunt every year. Like, this is perfect.
Yeah, we couldn't have made up our story better as far as the how hunting fits in all this.
Well, see, that's what threw me off at the beginning, because obviously, like, I knew the relationship you guys had, and I think it was maybe the buck you killed several years ago in Ohio, because I think, did I take the meat to Carrie's parents' place?
Highly likely.
You and I went together.
Yeah.
This was...
3 years ago?
Yeah, this was, in fact, I bet you can pull this out. If
3 or 4 years ago?
Go to Dropbox and just look for Corey's buck, and you'll find one from 2017 that would have been.
4 years ago.
27.
Because I remember going there and dropping that off. I'm like, oh, dude, this makes sense. Like, Corey's from here. He's like, no. Like, that's his wife's
So the in-laws live like 10, 15 minutes away.
Yeah.
And so these guys live in Nashville now.
Exactly. So then it's like, that's when the whole story for me was like, oh, wow, like, this is truly a lot more random than I thought. Like, here I thought, like, oh, Corey just grew up there. Like, that's how you met him. Like, it makes a ton of sense. No, not at all.
Yeah, so 8 years ago, my wife will be married 5 years in March. 8 years ago, she moved to Nashville. She's like, oh, I'm from this place called Uniontown. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Where? Where's that? She's like, oh, it's out of Pittsburgh. I was like, oh,
yeah.
Cool.
I've been there.
So they actually, that Thanksgiving, they were coming home, and I think I jumped in the car with her, and came up here. She dropped me off on the side of the road somewhere in Ohio, and Jared picked me up. And
you're lucky. Based on his hosting skills, you're lucky he picked you up.
Yeah, at that point, he's just like, yeah, let's go. We're doing it. So we met up, and
I'm a pretty good host.
Yeah, it's flawless.
Thank God it's improved.
Yeah.
We got good parents. They showed me the way.
Your parents are like the king of hosts, the king and queen of hosting.
The problem is, like, I didn't know how to host at hunting because, like, I was just figuring it out myself. Like, I didn't know. I had just hung stands that, like, we found in the woods or that my dad hung before. And so, as I was starting to host Corey, I was also figuring out, like, oh, this is how you hang a tree stand. Oh, you can fit 2 of them in here. Like, oh, we could film this thing. And so over time, we've refined our setup. And
so I guess during a lot of those hunts and stuff, were you guys hunting with like Brian and Dale? Was it like the deer camp atmosphere that you guys were experiencing, or was it more of Jared and his dad and just like close family?
They've always been like, everyone's always been in and out.
Yeah.
Like we've had, I think last year was the first time we were all there at the same time. Not this past season, but the one before, where all of us were at deer camp at one time. Yeah.
Because to me, that's what really pulls somebody in, is that experience of like a camp atmosphere, I guess, on that side.
Yeah.
It really draws people in on that.
What am I hearing there, Ian?
Computer fan.
Just the computer fan?
Yeah.
Sorry. Just want to make sure it wasn't my mic here.
Yeah, no, it's just computer. Because that tends to be what I feel like pulls people in more often. Yeah, there you go. That is definitely the one.
Yeah, here, play this real quick. So this is your first deer?
This is my first buck.
First buck. And so this was me filming. This was like, we figured out how to...
And correct me if I'm wrong, but this is another, like, you guys put in a lot of time on this deer, right?
No.
Or was this
like the second or third night? This was early season.
Oh, that's right.
But he had hunted with us a few years before this happened.
That's an awesome deer. Deer was a toad, body-wise, for sure. All right, I've already said 4 times, like, why haven't you shot Corey?
Well, Jared was to the right of me, so I actually couldn't see him right until that last moment.
Yeah.
Where he came out from the tree, so he came out from behind me.
Last light. He came out. He snuck out of nowhere. It was like
we were like ready to get down.
Yards, probably before we saw him, and I was like, right here, we're shooting this buck.
Did you know that deer?
No.
This is starting to form a pattern.
Yeah,
it is.
Yeah, for sure. No, it was one of those deals where, like, I mean, it was Corey's first buck, so I didn't know exactly what we were looking for. We had dumped a pile of corn, and so we had hunted probably at least 2 or 3 years consistently together. Like, we were attempting to do this before this happened. And so this year we changed from what I think was probably like a mid-October or November hunt to early. I was like, man, this seems like more of an early season farm, which I do now.
It now is.
I said, let's try that. And so he came out for, I think it was probably opening week type of a deal, or maybe a few days into the season. And so my strategy was, let's dump a pile of corn down on the Thompson and a few other places and, like, see what shows up. And nothing had showed up at any of these other ones. I was like, man, there's beans down here. Let's just give this spot a shot.
Give it a shot.
The wind was good, and this buck showed up out of nowhere, and like instantly,
Well, you could tell he's a mature
point,
deer.
I had at this point figured out pretty good. Well, I mean, it's a 3-year-old buck, but he's a 6-point, and I knew exactly what he was. I was, man, that deer's not ever gonna score very high. It's Corey's first buck, like it's for sure the biggest buck he's ever shot at this point. I was like, we're shooting.
Did you ever gun hunt, Corey?
No.
Not to jump. It's always been bow for you.
It's always been bow. Yeah, I
Interesting.
never really had a desire to gun hunt.
A lot of people don't.
It's like because I like archery in general.
It's that close encounter like that, obviously. Like just, I mean, you're in their wheelhouse at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that being in there, and then I'm not opposed to it by any means.
Sure.
I would absolutely. I think I would really enjoy it, depending on where we were going and what we were doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's something like, I mean, I've obviously gun hunted my entire life, but like if I have my choice, I'd bow hunt year round. You know, it's just that's what you eventually find which one you go with, and that's what and at the end of the day, the amount of effort you have to put in on a bow hunting, you know, stance or sit or season.
If I ever gave you an option, like you never asked, but I always just was like, hey, we're going bow hunting.
I mean, you've gun hunted a little bit, but I mean, as long as I've known you. I don't even know if you've ever picked up a gun.
I think I've killed
couple bucks,
maybe a few more since then. No, definitely no bucks. I've killed one doe with a gun, and it was the first deer that I ever shot.
It's interesting.
It was Marlin 30-30. I shot a doe.
Which I think makes sense why Corey probably picked up and ran with bow, because that's probably where you were drifting.
Same deal.
As well.
And do you know what I got that from my uncle Dale was like he just wasn't a gun hunter. He was a big part of my inspiration for getting into deer hunting to begin with, and he kind of just had the same mindset. He's like, I have a gun, like I'll go out every once in a while, but like I just prefer to bow hunt. So
part of it's the intricacy of gun hunting compared to bow.
For
so,
sure.
like, I can't go in my backyard where I live in the middle of Nashville and shoot a gun.
No.
I can shoot my bow all day long without fail, you know, and I can just check my bow and not worry about it getting to where I need it to go, you know, versus a gun. There's so much, there's so many other caveats of doing, you know, this. So the ease of archery, I think, has been something that's lent itself to why I've also done
the
it.
seasons too. I think because we were always trying to figure out like when could Corey come up even, and the gun season is so short. It's like
and it starts the Monday after Thanksgiving in Ohio. So I mean, if you're working or traveling, you're usually heading back by that.
So time wise, access wise, it just always made sense to.
So that
and time, just time, like the time.
Dude,
like I don't. If you're gonna do one thing, like I don't have time to go and sit and shoot. Really, even my bow most of the time. So it's like when I have that time, how do you split up that amount of time that you can allocate to something when you know you need to be getting something done too?
For sure. So that deer's 2017. That's what we said on that one. Were there any others in 1819?
Yeah.
Doe.
Well, there were like the backstory is like the farm, and like as I said, I'm progressing too, and not only like my own hunting, but in hosting Corey. You know, our goals for this farm, and we're hunting the same farm year after year, have evolved as well. And I think that, you know, I fell into a trap a few years ago, maybe not a trap, but a misconception of like, man, if I do X, Y, and Z on this farm, if I plant these food plots, if I do this timber work, and these deer are gonna get 5-6 years old, and we're gonna have booners to hunt every year. And I was like, kind of trying to pull Corey along in that goal, as well as, you know, the 4 or 5 other guys.
Which is tough because he's killed one buck at this point.
That hunt, absolutely, yeah, it's very tough. And so I've actually held him off of some big deer. There was a deer we called Conan.
I remember that one.
He was the biggest deer on the property last year.
Not this past year, but the year before, he was probably like a mid 150s 3-year-old, like just a toad.
You filmed him, didn't you?
We had him I had him at 20 yards the
Working
first morning
right?
out.
In the same stand in the pinch
stand.
where he killed this buck this year.
Yeah.
I held him off of that buck the year before, which is actually bigger than the buck he shot this most recent year. But like I said, we've evolved into, I think, you know, and I'm sure there's some stuff in between here, but like this year I've finally have backed off of that. And I was like, I couldn't another year, because
your expectations had to come back at some.
They
I
had
mean,
to
you've
at some point.
tried.
I was like, I cannot hold Corey off of a deer like this for another year. And we had hunted for a week straight, and for 10 years straight at this point, with, you know, one other buck to show for it. Eventually, I caved, and I was like, dude, we're killing that deer.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think even you personally, and you and I have had this discussion on the farm, is like, you know, and it's frustrating, you know, because obviously if you kill that 3-year-old that's 150 inches, there's definitely no chance he's making it to 4 and 170. But what seems to be a pattern on your place, and this is like the I guess if you think about how people look at 1,000 acres, they're like, well, man, you could grow tons of big deer. It's like, it seems like there's a pattern to these deer getting killed by somebody else, you know, or at least disappearing. We don't really know what happens to a lot of them.
That's the reality, is that the chances of a deer getting killed, even if I don't shoot him or one of our guys don't shoot him, is higher than I thought.
Well, it's a tough reality to face.
Yeah.
Even out of that stand where we saw Conan, we knew there was a guy in the woods, 70 yards on the other side of the fence that was sitting there. We didn't see him every day, but we knew that he was there.
That's the reality of it, though.
And if I passed on him, he most likely was not going to pass. He was a monster, to see him come walking through.
Yeah, and that's a tough
Conan
spot.
is an example of that deer. We haven't seen that deer.
Yeah.
So after I held Corey off of that deer in
2018, right? Or 19?
19.
No, it was 2019.
2019. Yeah, he never showed up again.
Yeah.
So and we're just trying to get him to that 4-year-old mark. Like 4 years old is the benchmark at this point. Like we're thinking that's the age that a whitetail is showing. At least 95% of its potential between 4 and 6 years old is like the sweet spot. And so I'm like, man, if we can just get them to 4 years old. And we've had several bucks that, are 4, you got one right behind you.
Right over the shoulder.
And I've passed on some world-class bucks that have walked through there. Otherwise, that would Conan, for example.
For sure.
And these other ones. Yeah. But I'm fine with that mindset. Like it's not a rush for me to go and get this hunt over with. Like I'm patient and hopefully refining my abilities and my talent and skills over time to be able to deliver on one that is the one that we've been, that we're
So I think patience brings up a big key because, I know the backstory, and this is what I want everybody to kind of hear, is 2020 was a grind for you guys in terms of your hunt. You hunted, mid-October? Yep. Was when the start of the hunt was?
The 25th was the last day of the hunt.
I had 10 days straight.
Was it 10 days?
It was 10 days because I was up at I was 11 out.
I try to stretch it more every year. If the boss gives me time.
Off. if we get the time, we do.
I'm like, dude, why don't you come in on like a Thursday this time instead of like Saturday morning? We'll stretch it out first.
And I actually changed it. I came in Wednesday this time, I think too. We made it even earlier.
But it was a super grind, and so I guess we know. Obviously, season opens up, beginning of October for Ohio. Late September, yeah. So we know what seems to be is your property is definitely better at that time frame. And you hunted hard. You killed this deer, second day of the season in 2019?
In 2019.
Yeah. So and I know you personally hunted hard that opening week of 2020. And it almost from the get-go, like they were there, but they're starting to give you the slip. Right. You're seeing them on camera.
It really does seem like if you're not successful in October and ideally early October on that farm, it gets tougher.
It just goes downhill, which is so different than what people think because they're like, Halloween, rut, like here it comes. And you guys had previously hunted some of that.
All of it.
You've bounced all over, which is kind of what we've done in Kansas too, right? We've continually bounced around until we feel like at least now we've got this sweet spot of the third week of November in Kansas, and we're like, this is one we need to stick to. Though we lean both ways. You guys now are in that middle of October, which to me, if you catch the right cold front and scrapes are hot, like you could hit a home run.
That's what we're looking for. I do think that's the best opportunity that our farm gives us is when they're still. It seems like they're still in somewhat of a summer range, but those acorns are starting to drop, and if we can get a rain or a cold front, I know that's when they're the most predictable. And so that's what we were looking for. I think you'll see in the episode at some point whenever we drop that is that we were really just there for an extended period of time hoping for one of these events that I could move in, read the sign, and kill the deer that's there.
And so are you guys, so let's say back up 10 days, around give or take the 15th of October, right? Are you engaging morning and evening at this point in hunts? Is it weather dependent?
We only did evenings, I think, for the first bit. For the first couple of days, because the weather, it got real hot.
We got cell cameras all over, so obviously, I think if you guys got something on a morning pattern, you probably would have pulled a trigger on it.
Yeah, we didn't have anything daylight yet.
We were just
and it got real warm.
Got warm.
Story of 2020.
So we would just kind of hang out, shoot our bows during the day, try to make a plan to strategize, move cameras around.
We'd get out pretty early though.
Yep.
In the afternoons, and then have longer sits, which was fine, which was nice.
But somewhat unproductive. It seemed like, at least for the first few days. So I guess encounter wise, you know, we knew what deer were on that property, right, in terms of a target.
Yeah, and it wasn't a lot, unfortunately, because it started off like pretty good. There was one section of the farm where I was getting, there was a really nice 12 point that was down there. There was a heavy 8 point that I was targeting early in the season. Dad had actually killed a nice 8 point off of
a deer that I think impressed us all, much bigger than we thought.
It was bigger than we thought. But that's a great example of the predictability in October. Was I was getting the pictures. I just walked in, hung the stand. I said, Dad, you got to hunt this spot. He hunted it a couple days and killed the deer. And you can do that.
It was on it was a bead right to him.
Yeah, you can do that. So that's what I was hoping to replicate with Corey. And as October went on, you know, Dad killed that one deer, and so that deer's gone. The deer just started disappearing, you know. And I don't think guys were killing them. They just were moving off of the property.
And what's your strategy at this point? I mean, because, you know, break down the farm. You've got a lot of agriculture. You still have some pasture, CRP type grounds. You've got a ton of food plots, but you also have a ton of oaks and acorns.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're at this mid-October period. I guess kind of describe, like, what are you guys focused on? Knowing what Corey's expectations are in terms of a deer, you know, probably different than you, like, saying, hey, I want to kill that giant 8 point, right? At this point, you're trying to get Corey on a mature buck.
I wanted that 8 point. We actually hunted that 8 point as well.
Yeah, I think we set Corey's standards probably the same as mine. Like I'm also just trying to kill a mature buck. Like I would love to target a specific animal, and we do. I mean, that's what we did with Dad's buck, you know. But like I just don't always have the deer to support that mission. So sometimes you just have to say, man, I want to kill one of these 3 mature deer. I'm hunting this area depending on wind, what food sources are still available, all these factors that we're considering.
Stands are a big deal too, as far as
sure.
when because you have 2 stands that we're hiking in with sometimes, plus our sticks, plus we have my bow, all the camera equipment, and we're setting that up every time.
Yeah, it's a lot,
and it's a lot of stuff to do.
And it's hot, and you're sweaty.
Yeah.
I tell you what, though, man, we got good at it. We were running and gunning like with some skill.
Yeah,
we had 2 stands, 1 set of sticks, camera equipment. You know, and then stuff that we were starting to get into some pre-rut, so I would bring the antlers with us every once in a while.
I guess at what point did you, because I would say, I don't want to say standard, right, but you've got a handful of what I would consider go-to stands, go-to spots, right, that you probably hunted out of the gate.
35 of them. Which honestly I'm straying away from more and more. Like I really have gotten more mobile as a hunter, and so well, those stands are there, and we'll definitely hunt them with some box blinds as well that are you know, nice. But I think for that mid to late October, every deer is different and they're doing a pretty specific routine. And so if we can get in and read sign, correlate that with a weather event, and hang and hunt, I think that's the most effective.
Well, I mean, most people, I know we talked about it in the Kansas hunt, especially for me, you know, the number of deer I've killed or at least had a chance of killing at on the first or second day of a sit. You know, I always tend to find that my success comes from those first opportunities in a spot. The longer I hunt it, I know a lot of people are against it. There's guys that I know that'll sit out the same damn stand for 10 days, and that's cool. I think that...
I will too.
I know.
Given the right time of year,
yeah.
You get into that mid to late November, it's about the right spot.
I will say, just based on where my brain is, and I have a tough time doing that. By the second or third day of sitting in the stand, I'm already thinking about where I'm going next, because I feel like I've put so much pressure and scent and things in that spot that, you know, I've screwed it up. Now, that's just me personally. You know, I know other guys who sit the same stand out all year, and they'll end up killing a giant.
And we're also doubling down on that. I mean, there's 2 of us now in that stand
Doubling
to
down
worry
on the
about the
stink.
pressure and the
For
scent,
sure.
the sound, like all of it, and the movement, and just trying to minimize that. Because after you're sitting in that spot for 3 or 4 days, you're like, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
We're really relying on the predictability of the deer that time of year. And so while in November I'll get in and just sit a spot out, in October I'm not really sure exactly what any of these deer are doing, and so we're trying to get to a spot where we can observe and then make a move, assuming they're going to do something similar. And that was really our strategy, was let's go to where the deer are.
Yeah.
And we do have those clutch spots that we know,
For sure.
without a doubt, over the years that we have seen repeated just big deer out of the pinch, and so we go.
Yeah, as the week went on, we eventually you know, transitioned into one of those spots, because as like the pre-rut,
You got aggressive.
the pre-rut, I don't know if we got more aggressive, but we went back to one of those known spots, and it wouldn't have been good early in our hunt. It just was.
And that's the crazy thing. I mean, think about, you're saying that like in the early, it's 7 days before, 8 days before, you know, I mean, the changing that is happening during that time.
Every day, man.
The coverage, I mean, even just in every stand, you'll walk out a day later, and the coverage in a stand for 2 of us versus the day before is like, we can't hunt here today, you know, or if the sun's up and we're just totally getting shadowed on it.
I guess talk about a little bit, because I mean, I know we talked every day, obviously, during that time frame of what you guys are seeing, you know, what's the strategy, what do we do next? Like, I would say probably by day 5, 6, 7, like, you guys are worn out at this point, not just physically, because I mean, it is a demanding, but mentally, like, you're at this point that you're grinding, it just doesn't seem, you know, to be coming together, you know. And I think that, and in a lot of cases, if you're hunting by yourself, like, you may be done at that point, like, just mentally just spent. But you guys having each other at least to kind of have that, like, discussion and camaraderie and thought process, like, you know, it had to at least help a little bit to pull you through the week.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, at some point throughout the week, like, we're just hanging out. Like, it just,
sure,
we're not, I mean, we're in the stand and we're definitely hunting, but it's just, we're just hanging out and just enjoying, you know, the time that we get with one another, because it's once a year in some cases. And
it's a healthy offsite for mental, like, detachment of
sure.
day-to-day stuff. So, but I mean, we're still working in the mornings when we're not in the stand. And so that's part of it, is like, when something happens and you have, you know, a fire in the office that you're having to take care of and you're trying to get out in your stand, you know, the balance of it, where you still can't necessarily completely disconnect. But some of the areas on the farm don't have cell service for Verizon. So for me, it's a nice disconnect.
Yeah, like, you're out, you're unplugged at this point.
I literally can't do anything.
I cannot do anything.
Well, in hindsight, we did a lot too. Like, we took some of those opportunities so like, Margie and I run an ice cream shop in Pittsburgh. And so we closed on October 20th this year for the season. And so Corey and I had to jet back.
I remember you guys went down.
Mornings. Yeah. We drove home, and when we got there, Margie's her battery was dead. Her car wasn't running, so we had to, like, you know, fix that.
I forgot that it was all, like, the same time.
Go and board up the building, and so we basically, like, took maybe a whole day.
It was a day. It ended up being like almost 80 degrees.
Yeah,
like,
it
I
was.
don't know.
Hot.
I was like, we're not going
dude,
out tonight.
Let's just bail.
Nothing moved on camera.
Got to take care of some stuff at home, so we just got out for a day. And then we had some other issues come up with work and stuff. And so that's the good thing about that amount of time, is, like, it kind of gives us the ability to, like, step back, assess, take care of some things, and then jump back in.
Yeah, I mean, there's a point in it, especially when the weather is not cooperating, that you're doing more harm than good. Yeah. Right? The fact that you're just going to force a hunt to get out there and be in the stand just isn't going to do anybody any good. You can't kill them if you're not in the stand, but also you got to be smart about the amount of pressure you're putting on some of these areas.
For sure. And along with the temperature warming up, I mean, these deer, as I said, are showing up less and less. And we've got the cell cameras. You know, I'm expecting to see something, and it's just not happening. So it's like, well, let's wait.
And we knew we had a cold snap coming.
You got to do something. And then it was warm for most of, like, the middle of the week, I think. And then right at the very end, we had, like, 2 days of a nice front came through, and ended up working out for us.
Yeah, it did. So, I mean, there is definitely the fatigue that goes into it after that time, but it is that recharge that's also the patience side of it. You have to be patient. And, I mean, unless you're just going out to kill anything, the first thing you see. Because we had plenty of shots on other...
I was going to say, I mean, we talk about this grind. I mean, you guys are seeing probably, good quality 2-year-olds and stuff like that.
Yeah, constantly.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not like there were definitely some hunts, I think, that, you know, action was pretty piss poor, but I mean, you are seeing quality deer. It's just not what you're looking for, right? So I mean, if you know, we say that as, like, you know, you're not gonna kill any bucks. I mean, if you wanted to kill a 2-year-old, probably first evening you shot a 2-year-old.
Yeah, and I think, like, speaking to the fatigue aspect of it, like, it's not just that week and those days that we've put in. Like, for me, it's like, man, I've been promising Corey a big buck for years at this point, and he's come out every year, and we've hunted this hard every year. And we've had some success along the way as we watched with that buck, but, like, that's weighing on me. Eventually, it's like, man, I gotta, like, come through on this promise here of, like, we're gonna kill a big buck, and, like, he's just been super patient to hang in there with me as we've been figuring it out, and I think that paid off a big way on the very last hunt that we had this week, the very last morning. So it was the 25th was our last day to hunt. I think it was a Saturday,
Sunday.
Or Sunday, maybe it was a Sunday, and as I said, we had this front come through, like.
And you're flying out that day.
I'm flying out that afternoon.
We're not saying, oh, it's like, hey, this is the last day. No. Like, I got to go to the airport still and get out of this
like,
place.
What, 2:30, something like that, and
in the afternoon.
And it's about an hour from the farm, so we had one last morning to hunt. You're kind of like, the hunt's kind of over because you're like, man, if we kill something, like we're gonna have to scramble to figure out.
And
how
you guys had seen some deer because that front came through. You had seen some bucks or decent bucks was it the night before?
The night
That's
before,
right.
we had one come in, and I think we would have shot him.
Eventually, we settled on that portion of the farm. I said, man,
Can you tap into the episode, Ian? I'd like to see kind of as we get to that point because I think that deer came in. Was that the deer that came in and hit the tree?
Last light.
Last
came
light.
in,
Do you have
and
that,
he couldn't. There's just
link,
no
Ian?
way to get through.
do you have that link in? You have it? Cool.
But yeah, go ahead. I mean, so at this point, and man, how bad does that suck? Because you've now just hunted 10 days. Like you finally get a front. Things look like they're picking up, and you're like, dude, I got tomorrow. Like I got to go.
Yeah.
Did it ever cross your mind like maybe we shouldn't even hunt Sunday morning?
No,
'Cause-
that's not an
No.
option. No, the thought was like, I was looking at the flights and I was like, maybe I should change my flight.
You were seriously considering. You're like, maybe I could just stay for like 5-6 more days.
Yeah.
Isn't that how? I mean, dude, it goes from 0 to 60. It's like you're exhausted, it's hot, and nothing, and then all of a sudden the lights turn on, and you're like, I don't want to go.
That's why I was trying to describe it. Like I was like, man, it's just like, oh, there are deer that
There
live
are
in this,
deer.
because you sit for so long and you just see deer, but does and like just non-target animals, and eventually when one finally shows up, you're like, holy cow! You're like, I can't believe that thing lives out here in the woods. It's very bizarre, but
Let's fast forward towards maybe the last 5 minutes or so, probably, Ian. Yeah, we'll get it to a point here.
here you go.
Okay. Yeah, back up just a little bit. There you go.
Who's that guy?
How about that?
Here you go.
Okay, so
Back a little more.
More.
Yep. Jump back to like 9 minutes.
yeah, there we go. Okay, cool. Just pause it right there for a second. So this is the deer the night before
Yep.
that you guys had seen. Now, where are you at this point? Are you at pinch?
Yep.
We're in the pinch still.
So that's what I'm saying. Is
You found the spot that
we
you
settled
like, hey,
into the
I'm
pinch. It's a
committing.
known good spot. It's the spot where Corey passed on Conan the year before. So like we got some history.
When you and
there.
I have talked about it in years past, like you've always had a camera there. There's usually a scrape there. Like we've seen big bucks show up in this time
it's just a spot, man.
Just like that.
Dad killed a big buck there. I almost got a chance at the muley buck there several years ago.
Yep.
Maverick has shown up there back when.
It wasn't Maverick. It ended up being
The
another
lookalike
Maverick,
mature
yeah.
8 point. But that's right. So we got history in the spot.
What was that?
Awesome
The
spot.
one that giant old buck that showed up.
The slob.
The slob.
Yep, he was down there October 17th.
Known mid.
I've got pictures of deer at that scrape on the pinch October 17th for 3 years in a row.
Which is why we'll have this discussion every year during that time frame, and we can argue every stand on that property, but that is the known spot. And
Yeah.
and again, it's about time and weather and coming together, but they'll show up there at some point.
And you have to go. You have to be there.
Gotta be
You,
there.
have to
Gotta be
take. You
there.
got to take the chance.
You got to be there.
And it really does seem like a late October to early November. It's
Well,
a-
and I was gonna say it looks like you've got some oaks and stuff here, so there's probably acorns dropping in and around that area as well.
It's just a little secondary ridge off of a primary bedding ridge. Yeah, there's oaks everywhere, but they just travel through there.
Mm-hmm.
The bucks especially will cruise that.
Yeah, go ahead and play it a little bit, Ian. Check this deer out. So yeah, at this point, I assume you're looking at that deer thinking like, if he comes close enough.
Yeah, and again, like I knew what he was.
I couldn't
Did
see
you
him.
know this deer, Jared?
Yeah, I think we had some pictures
Yeah.
of him.
I couldn't see him from where I was sitting, so I was trying
It's
to
a good
peek
deer.
behind. But Jared's like, we're taking him if he comes in.
It's so funny how these deer, and it tends to be. This is, I feel like, a fringe spot for you to where, like, you either know that deer
Well, you know
or
what?
you probably won't know him when he shows
I
up here.
rattled this deer in too. Remember? So
Yeah.
it was like getting towards dusk, and I cracked the horns together October 24th, which seems to be, in my opinion, one of the best times.
Yeah.
That 24th or 25th to the 31st, if you can crack them.
Yeah, that's funny, man. It is. You're right.
in.
And I mean, so you still had a cell camera there, right? At the pinch,
We had one up the fence line a couple hundred yards.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just one
and
of
it
those.
had been quiet.
Yeah, it had been kind of quiet. Like typically, I would think that a buck. The pinch is just one of those spots that if I've got a buck showing up anywhere on the property, I know he's going to move through there at
Sure.
some point.
Yeah. And so, like, at this point, you guys are like, okay, well, bottom of the ninth, we're going back to the pinch because at least that
Especially
deer had
after that
been
encounter,
there.
I was like,
Yeah.
we'll shoot that deer, or
Comes
another
back.
one could show up.
Yeah. And I mean, you're at that time frame of the year too. I know this year for me, the buck I was hunting here, October 27th, he was in a full-out chase for the first time with a doe. So you're at that point where all of a sudden, it can happen at any moment. And so, when you see a good buck like that, you have to assume, like, there's a chance that this thing's going to turn on any second.
Yep.
Like,
and the weather was telling us that it probably would.
So you guys come back, you commit into that spot. Did you plan? I guess how early do you get into that stuff? Because again, you've got
early.
You got a lot of
stuff. I
stuff
wanted to get
with
in
you.
there good and early, just because.
Setting the night before is a big deal. Like not like leaving everything in the
You
tree.
left everything in the tree.
We left everything.
Yeah, that's huge, man.
We did that a lot, man.
If you can leave your stuff in the tree, like what a difference that makes the morning of, especially when you get into this time of year. I've had bucks follow me in. And so I don't have to, just because they hear something and they're like, doe, like they're not sure, or, a buck moving in on them. So we left all of our stuff, and the goal is to, get in quietly. But once you get in, you don't have to do anything. Yeah. Get up in the tree, sit down, because then it's very possible.
And we say leave everything, and I know we probably take some shit on this, but like we'll leave our bows, knocked, everything, like ready to rock. Literally, like you're in it and you're ready.
Climb up the tree. Strap up, strap in, sit down, be quiet.
Done.
I think I fell asleep for the first 30 minutes because it was still, we had a nice buffer of time.
So you're in there
at that point. Strapped in. That's a big ladder stand.
Were you paying attention to the wind at this point, or was it just known being?
It didn't matter. I was in it no matter.
You were
what.
in it.
Yeah, we were committed.
Sometimes that's what you got to do.
It can work on a few different winds, so I wasn't super worried about it.
Yeah. So I guess back up just a little bit, Ian, on the side of just back up a little bit.
You're fine. There's a different deer he's looking at.
Oh, okay, cool. So this is basically last morning, and so you guys see some deer.
We were rattling pretty consistently.
Right out of the gate.
Well, I think at this point you're committed. Like they're cruising, or at least up on their feet, get their attention.
It was an awesome morning. Yeah, it was crisp. It felt right.
Yeah, and so I guess at some point you have other deer moving through. Was it you, Jared? You looked up and saw that buck.
No, I was looking in the direction that eight point had come the night before.
Sure, just pause it right there, Ian.
And
or back it up just a smidge.
And Corey was looking, more towards the field edge, and I think we rattled in a couple spikes or
what you just saw run through.
Little forkhorns first, and I was like, as soon as they cleared out there, I was like, let's crack them again. I'm happy to rattle every 15, 20 minutes, if I have to that time of year. So yeah, we cracked them again. I don't know what it was, 5-10 minutes later.
We were in the final, the countdown of having to get out.
Yeah, this isn't first light anymore.
It was
at this point.
8:30.
Yeah.
And by the time we'd get out, get packed down, get back to the farm.
And then what did you say? You turned it. I remember, because I was sitting this way and he's like, don't move, there's a giant buck. so I was just like...
So Jared's sitting behind me, right, facing kind of this way. And we had an encounter earlier in the week where when Jared was sitting, he was sitting on the opposite side of the tree from me. Mm-hmm. And I went to go, there was something that came up and I couldn't move. I was 15 yards by the time this deer came up.
And Corey has a way of just saying, giant buck right there, don't move. And like, I have literally no, if the deer's looking at us.
And you're locked at this point. Like, you're not.
Yeah.
Well, earlier that week when I tried to get his attention without doing anything, I ended up reaching behind me and I smacked the antlers. And so literally this deer's just sitting there and I'm just crying. Like, oh my goodness, I didn't know they were right there.
Yeah.
From when I reached back. So this one comes up, I see the horns and I can't make out what it is because there's the brush.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to not move, and that's when I'm just like casually like, "Hey, Jared, there's a giant buck right there," and I knew if he could get and stand up, he'd be able to see over the brush.
Mm-hmm. I'm like, "Where is he?" He's like, "Shh,"
and he's right in front of me. I'm sitting, so I can't. My bow's here, and so I realize that I have to cross over. Jared's got to swing the arm around and film this way, and so I don't know what you did from there because I didn't move. Did you swing the camera
up? Is that
up?
where they're typically coming from?
They will come from that way. So there's a ridge that hides, and a lot of them will just drop right down it, and you don't see them until they're right at the edge of this. There's a tree line and a fence line there that's maybe 20. We're like 20 or 25 yards off of it, and so sometimes they'll walk that fence line, and we've got a 30-yard shot. Or they'll come right down in. There's a fence gap there, and they'll walk right in front of you.
Right down in.
So I think what I did was once I kind of determined where he was at and that he wasn't looking right at us, I stood up and turned around. So I have the tree between me and him, and Corey's right below me.
And he's looking at this point because he heard you rattle.
Yeah,
that's what he's coming in.
He's looking down in the woods, and so you'll probably hear in the episode I was telling Corey he's going to do one of two things. I was like, be ready for either one of these. He's either going to walk down the fence line or he's going to commit.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started filming him at that point. I finally could get on him. I still didn't know what deer it was necessarily, but...
Yeah, go ahead and play a little bit on, like, this deer coming in obviously looks really impressive.
So right here, I was like, I think I just said dead deer.
Yeah,
like,
kill
that deer's
him.
dying. He's coming in. He committed.
So yeah, as soon as he started walking
that's
in,
a
so
stud.
I'm
Gun
standing. So the plan was that Jared would stop him, and I would shoot.
Was Jared
Right,
on the
Jared.
same page at this point?
Yeah, we had planned that.
Yeah.
And so you'll actually, if you'll even
I think
hear
I
it in the
do
video.
hear- yeah,
So
I'm-
I'm facing, and mind you, Jared's here, and I'm trying not to be loud.
And you came to full draw. Did I tell you to come to full draw?
No, I just did. I just drew as soon as because there was that tree that he walked by.
I mean,
and
he's close at this
I picked.
point.
I knew exactly where I was going to shoot him, like without hesitation, without doubt. I had that spot picked. I knew range. I knew exactly where I wanted him.
So, and in hindsight, as we're watching this, I probably was planning on stopping the deer if I needed to.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't get to that point. Like he like as you'll see, as soon as he crest this tree, he shot. Corey shot and drilled him, but like I wasn't ready to stop
Sure.
him yet.
At all. So I actually draw, and I go. I tell Jared out loud. I say stop him, and Jared doesn't stop him, and
I
he's
didn't
right
hear.
where he couldn't hear me.
I think I remember hearing that in the camera briefly.
And so he didn't stop him. I was like, this is where I
Dude.
want him. I was like, I got him. I'm
And at
shooting
this
him.
point, you didn't really study the deer like, oh, I know who he is, or if you just
was big enough. He was
Gut,
big enough.
gut instinct enough was Corey's killing this deer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as soon as I got a green light, it was game on.
So you got to
Like, we-
play this.
you know.
It's an awesome deer, and he's definitely on a mission. Coming in to do this, and this is the part. Like even with a camera guy, like the coordination of trying to get on this deer and around trees and everything. Yeah, that's an awesome deer. Just looking, he knows. Boom. Okay, so shots made.
So go back to the shot, Ian. Because what I want to show is, like, he had just cleared that
Right
tree,
here.
and I would have let him get.
Get ready to pause.
Like, if first of all, I wanted just to stop on his own, which I think he might have. If he made it to this point,
Like right over here?
yeah, I would have stopped him.
And that's probably perception of where you were versus where Corey's
My
looking.
window was right in that spot, and
And that's the hardest part. I mean, especially, it's one of the benefits of self-filming in that, like, the viewpoints are basically the same, but when you're communicating cameraman, like, what you see, even if you're directly over him, is slightly different than what Corey's seeing. And so, like, when you say it's this gap, Corey's saying, yeah, it's this gap right over here.
Yeah. And so you'll see, like, Corey's shot here is it's a touch back, but the deer is walking.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a thing you'll see all the time is when people shoot deer that are moving, it always hits further back than you think it's going to.
Did he say, oh, God, I livered him? Because that tends to be...
No.
I had no doubt. That arrow left, and I knew that thing was dead. I knew, as soon as we saw him, I knew it was
I
it.
kind of can't believe that this deer died as quickly as he did.
That's what I was saying. So, I mean, because obviously, got Ian played a little bit. Boom, okay, it hits. Like, you see
Go
the
ahead and take it
shot.
back.
It's not a pass-through.
Can you pause it right so we can see where that arrow hit?
I mean, you get a decent amount of penetration, but enough that I can see the arrow flailing a little bit. So, I mean...
Well, what I knew was dead deer. When I saw that the height was good and that it was mid-body, I said that deer's done.
Yeah. Just how long?
And then we watched it, and
that's a good
as
spot.
he's running, I'm thinking, like, man...
And you could see, I mean, obviously with that angle, you can see the hair where it's twisted up.
Yep.
That
look
arrow
at his,
is actually...
Look at his luminoc right there.
Yep.
Yeah, it's buried. It's right where you want to be up and down, but it's back probably 6 inches.
Mm-hmm.
And so as he's running off, like probably in the back of my mind, I was like, man, it's maybe liver. It's back a little bit, but dead deer.
Now, at any point in time, did you guys start to think, okay, like there's an excitement, you just probably
I
killed
shoved
this deer.
the camera and Corey. I was like, take the camera, and I pulled up my binoculars, and because
He stopped, didn't he?
Yeah, he went out there about
So I could
100
see,
yards.
I could see tail still the whole time
Mm-hmm.
as it was moving, and I could see like he started getting just
He
real
was
shaky, and I was like, is he going? He's going, and then that's when we just see him just
Yeah,
Which
he
is amazing.
stopped
right to the floor.
Because, I mean, had he walked out of sight, I would say you probably wouldn't have recovered him because
For
you would
sure
have
not.
had to go.
We would have had to leave like right then. We
Interesting.
wouldn't have had time to even
Yeah,
get
with
him.
that shot and with if we hadn't seen him, I would have said, man, like I hate to do it, but let's wait. We gotta wait.
And man, what an incredible feeling though of like literally, and I know it's like anytime you make it happen, it's cool, but like this has been a long hunt for you guys at this point, and to the wire at this point. And
hit play and you'll see Corey's reaction here. I don't think we have sound on it, but you'll be able to see it.
Probably the best reaction to a kill I've ever seen.
that is the complete sign of just relief and excitement and emotions all wrapped up.
I'm cold. My heart's pounding. I'm like borderline teared, crying.
Jared's telling you not to drop the camera lens.
I just shoved it in his arm because I don't know. Like, I don't film hunts for, all the time, and so I'm just, hey, take this.
Yeah.
It was so surreal to see him fall. I mean,
and dude, it's crazy because like I've watched clips of you guys, and it's probably in the episode somewhere, the same point of view, except it's you in a voice of disgust because there's a dude chainsawing like a half a property over.
It's in his stand, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's like what a contrast in emotions and experiences from like, there's no way in hell I'm gonna kill a deer at this stand to like that fast it happens.
And as soon as that stopped, it was like, we gotta get out of here. Like,
we gotta go.
We gotta go.
we started to go.
Now, did you feel confident enough, like once you went down, you're like, all right, like let's go get him, or what was the thought process?
Yeah, I could see him laying there. I was like, man, let's. I think, did we go straight back to the house after, or did we go over and look at him first?
We went and looked.
Okay, so yeah, I knew he was
good
down.
blood, I assume, once you got on the trail, or
there was actually not as much blood as I would have liked.
I don't think
maybe because it was a little bit higher, it was filling cavity, no pass through,
I don't
right?
think there was an exit either.
Yeah, no exit.
So it actually would have been, I think, pretty challenging to find him.
It probably just would have filled the cavity up.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we got down. We pulled all the stuff down out of the tree, just set it there. And I think at that point it'd probably been like a half an hour.
Yeah, mind you, it takes at least 30 minutes to get everything down out of it.
So the deer had been laying there for 30 minutes, and so we went over to check him out real quick. And there's a property line there. There's no fence or anything. It's kind of
and I want to see Corey with the deer.
It's kind of obscure as to where it is, but I think it was probably just across the property line. So I wanted to go and just drag it over to our end, and so we did that, and we got the opportunity to check them out and celebrate.
And so comes we don't think, at least, that you knew this deer. Maybe you'd seen him as a 2-year-old, but it didn't like hit like, oh, it's
yeah. I
this
still
deer.
don't know. There's some deer that I can speculate that it is, but I mean that was far away, and I just I don't know. There's a chance I've never seen this deer before,
which is kind of a cool thing. I mean, given you have a huge property, and I mean, how intensely we run cameras, from summer through now, right? Here's your recovery. This is what I really wanted to see, because it gets a good, like, this deer has incredible mass and tine length. Like, it's a stud. The brow tines on that thing. Did you guys think it was that big once you got up to it? Because I think you and I talked about it.
Well, I did. So, I personally think this is probably a 3-year-old buck. And I knew that when we decided to shoot him. I said, man, that's probably a 3-year-old, but a really good one. And when we got up to him, I said, dude, Corey, that's probably 140 plus. That's a big buck.
Yeah.
And I think he ended up taping out at like 147.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember when you told me the score, I'm like, yeah, that's a pick. Yeah. And at this point, this is now the second buck that we have, I would say, significantly underestimated in antler size. Because your dad's was one where you and I were both like, what, like mid 140s? Taped out at 150, right? Mm-hmm. And it goes to show you, like, I mean, it's hard to identify those deer in the doesn't matter how long you see them. I think you guys probably had the right reaction,
well,
which is
the beams on this deer. I think are what did it. They were like 20. They were like 24.5 inches, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that'll make all the difference on him.
Yeah, and he's a 10-point. He's got phenomenal tine mass. I know that doesn't do anything for the score, but he had good brow tine. Just solid genetics all around. And so, yeah, I mean, it was
well, and it goes that, a lot of guys could say, well, Jared, per what you're talking about on your farm, like, you probably should have passed that deer, but ultimately it's a deer that you didn't really recognize. So, I mean, is he actually living on your property? Probably not. Even if he was on your property half his life, the other half of his life, he's pretty vulnerable on the neighboring property. And so if you look at that in experience, and obviously where you're at, Corey, in your hunting career, like, there are plenty. My dad, who's taught me everything and hunted for, 40 years at this point, has never killed a buck like that. And so there were people that go their entire lives never killing a deer like that. And so I think it, number one, what a way to end, a long hunt for you guys.
Dude, what a weight that was lifted too. I think, at least for me, but probably for you too, because we've been doing it together. Is like we finally,
Well,
you know,
dude, I know-
finally broke the seal. Like, and I know we killed one a few years prior, and that was awesome when it happened. I remember it was awesome when that happened. But like this I think is more. This is what you've been striving for such a long time, and or at least is the next benchmark along. Like, what do I want to do next? You know
Well, I think a big thing there too, and obviously I give you a hard time about your hosting, Corey, early in the career, but like I know what kind of a host you are, and I know the passion that you have for that. I know what this hunt means to you every year. You know, you and Corey spending that time together. And I know that I think you and I probably had a discussion on day 7, maybe 8, to where you almost felt like you were failing Corey a little bit here.
That's definitely how I felt. Yeah.
And it's not your fault. I mean, there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, dude, you're doing everything in your power. But, like, I can tell in your voice, like, it's not that you're just not seeing deer and you're frustrated. It's the fact that you're like, man, I feel like I'm letting Corey down at this point, which isn't the case.
Oh, it's absolutely how I feel. It's like, man, how many years in a row can I have this, you know, this guy come out and hunt hard with me, like as hard as I'm hunting, and he's keeping up with me every step of the way to like, it's got to pan out at some point or I'm not doing my job.
Yeah. And then boom, just like that, it happens. And to me, like, I don't know, I get like the kids killing their deer this year. Like I almost get more excited for other people to kill a deer that I'm with than I do myself anymore, you know? And I'm sure with this relationship and what you guys have gotten through, you know, over the last 15 years, you know, to culminate something like that, it's like, wow, like that's powerful, you know. And I'm the only thing I wish you guys had was that night to celebrate together.
Yeah,
because I couldn't imagine what that would have been like in the barn, hanging, you know, drinking beer, doing whatever. But it's like, we did it, man. Like this is why we stuck it out for 10 days. We did it. But I think that only just kind of drives what's coming up this year for you guys,
for sure.
And for add 10 years to it. It's like that patience of being held off for so long and choosing that. I think that's where the risk reward, the time reward, that
crazy,
patience
man.
will come back for it. One of my favorite things is have you heard about the 10-year overnight success?
Oh yeah.
And it's like that whole idea of no one sees it, but it's like people will see this episode and they'll think that we just go out to this property and shoot a big deer.
Yeah,
And
Corey's
like,
got 1,000 acres to hunt with Jared. It's managed like crazy, and okay, cool. You hunted 10 days, but you still killed a giant buck.
Yeah, it's like, well, you know how many hunts I've sat and seen nothing.
Exactly.
On hours and days and hours.
Or got put in the wrong stand,
years.
you know,
Yep.
potentially.
And so, so to be able to see it pay off, and I agree with you. Like one of the most difficult things about it was amazing. He comes in, he goes down. We are now against the clock to not miss a flight.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to butcher him. We have to cape him out. We have to make sure that he's prepped well to be able to go to the taxidermy.
We did all of that within like an hour and a half. Like,
wow.
Yeah, caped him out, got him into we didn't have freezer space, so we had to go down to Grandma's house, get a key to get in there, put it in there. We
deep freeze.
We deboned the whole thing. I think we processed the whole deer.
It's crazy, man.
And so I went from being
pictures.
Covered head to toe in blood from butchering to being in an airport 3 hours later.
That's wild,
And so
man.
I couldn't process what happened initially, like just the deer itself and seeing that we got the shot, let alone that it was already all done.
And I think the big thing there too, and this is literally the foundation of our brand, right, with Hunter, is that even how fast the approach came, the shot came, the recovery came, the processing, like how much went into it before that all happened, you know, and you know, people will say, well, you know, I can't wait for hunting season. It's like, no, guys, this is a 365-day thing for us. Like, the moment the season ends, we're starting again so that those moments in mid-October that take 30 seconds can happen. And like you said, I think the entire 10 years for you guys in this case has kind of built up to that moment. And it hopefully, you know, this year is much the same. And maybe it's a bigger deer. Maybe it's an older deer. Maybe it's the same size deer. Like, there's this build up across your entire engagement in a property or in a hunting situation, or in this case, a hunting relationship, you know, that ultimately leads to something that it's like, man, we did it. You know, how do you define success, basically?
And that's,
you know?
man, so one thing that I've been really stuck on with this whole idea is that you don't rise to your goals, you fall to the level of your systems.
For sure.
And so these systems have been refined over the course of how long we've been hunting together, talking through things. But no matter what, there can still be things that happen that are unintended, just like smacking those antlers, like I was talking
Absolutely,
about.
man.
Whatever can go wrong will go wrong. But how do you prepare? How do you, combat that in the field to be able to take it head on and then to know, and then to be able to execute a shot, and the full preparation and everything is only time and experience that we've had from so many failures of doing it the wrong way, of learning experiences, conversing about it. And I mean, we called you as soon as we shot that thing and saw it drop,
and
right?
I guarantee, like, I was probably just as psyched as you guys were. And I'm like, what do you mean? I thought Corey was like on his way to the airport. You're like, no, dude, like,
we're going right now.
Yeah, man. And that's so cool. So I guess, like, what do we look for towards this year? Like, obviously we've got first episode in the can for Hunter, which that's probably, no offense, was why I was so excited. I was like, holy shit, we finally have an episode. It's the end of October for a whitetail show, and I'm like, we haven't got a kill yet. Like, man, we got to do something here. Yeah. But I mean, what does 2021 look like? I mean, what's the plan? I mean, is it Ohio? I know there's rumblings of a potential Kansas edition. Maybe
it's looking like that. Boss gave full support last week, so.
Oh man, and listen, you want to talk about, not that you guys don't, but I mean, you become part of the Eureka Deer Camp experience, which is, some people don't make it back from Eureka. Mentally, I don't know if Jared or I ever really leave the fields of Kansas. Like, it always just sits in the back of our head of like, what could we do better? I mean, hopefully we're there in couple weeks
we're gonna go do shed hunt,
and literally that is the moment that starts the process to next November.
As we said, it's really a year-to-year thing, and it definitely is a lifestyle for us. But I know that Corey's somewhat removed, living in Nashville and stuff. Like, it's cool that there is still this aspect of our lives that, like, anytime we get together, like, this is a part of it. And so I think we've been talking about Kansas and just opportunities to do what we're doing in Ohio, but on a bigger scale, more and more. And so, like, as you brought me in on the Kansas thing, like, my first instinct is like, man, Corey needs to be a part of this at some point too. And so I think we extended a formal invitation just because we have limited resources of like where to stay, like property that we're able to hunt. So finally I felt like, and with your blessing, we were at a point where I was like, man, we could get Corey as a part of this, as we're working on developing the Hunter brand, and obviously been a big part of like this first episode and everything. It's like, man, this is another good benchmark for us to look at. So like, maybe let's not leave Ohio and what we're doing here in the rearview mirror, but let's do something bigger.
Yeah, I think it's the adding to it, because going back to the camaraderie about just being in deer camp and being together. And now that we've gotten to know each other after all these years, like what an honor to be able to get out all together and do it. But as far as 2021, if we can add Kansas to it, Ohio will still be there. Like, we will still keep.
Well, we've got a new place in Ohio, right? Literally right around the corner from the farm, almost 400 acres now.
Which will be interesting too, because there's going to be a lot of opportunity this year. And so it just will, we're going to put in for those tags. And Ohio is over the counter. Kansas is a draw that we'll need to put in for in April, I think. And so I hope that both those opportunities work out, but we'll just kind of have to be flexible, as just like we were, with this hunt that we did here. It really is leading up to the time and saying, okay, what times are going to work? How is it all going to fall into place, and we'll make it happen.
Yeah.
It's going to be an exciting year, man. Well, Corey, dude, we appreciate you guys coming in and sharing the story. I know that you and Jared have a really cool bond, and like I said, I was just as excited as you guys probably were to see that happen, and very well deserving of it, man. You're a great person. I love the way that you kind of embrace this new lifestyle. I mean, that gets me excited to hear when people can just jump in fully like that. And obviously it become part of our family, not only in Stone Road, but now the hunter side of things. And, yeah, man, I'm psyched for you to hopefully be part of Kansas, right? Knock on wood, we still got to get drawn for this thing. But regardless, wherever we're hunting, this is what it's all about, is building these bonds and relationships and enjoying it, and I can only hope that, this fall we're all sitting there behind your buck this year. So, yeah, man, appreciate you coming in and sharing the story with Jared and I and everyone else. And, hopefully we have you on another podcast here in the near future.
Yeah, it'd be awesome. Thanks for having me. We couldn't have done this hunt without Hunter and Stone Road and your support on it. It's been unbelievable.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, we appreciate everybody listening to the Hunter podcast. I hope you enjoyed this story, and be on the lookout for Corey's episode to hit the waves here in the not too distant future. I'm excited for everyone to see that first episode, and we'll see you next time on Hunter Podcast.
Take me on down the river where the guilt can't find